You kneel in the dust just as the sun breaks over the ruins. Your hands are raw, the wind bites your neck. The desert has a way of stripping you down to nothing but breath and bones. For weeks, your team has said the same thing. This isn't it. The rumours are wrong. The tomb of Cleopatra is just a myth, a pretty story told by men who like their queens tragic. But now your brush stutters. A seam appears beneath your fingers. Stone against stone. Not natural. Deliberate. The air grows still as you uncover the edges. Someone sealed this place a long time ago, and they didn't want it opened. You pause, not out of fear, but reverence. You're about to disturb something the world forgot, or chose to forget. Before we go deeper into this story buried by time, if you're someone who finds meaning in the hidden corners of history, in voices lost to sand and silence, consider subscribing and liking this video. These forgotten truths deserve to be heard. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It still amazes me that we can explore these ancient secrets together, across continents and centuries, like threads in the same fabric. The dust thickens as you pull the slab free. Below, the darkness is heavier than it should be. It clings like a shroud. You descend, one step at a time, into a chamber untouched for 2,000 years. The walls are smooth limestone, no carving, no gold, just emptiness, silence, and then bones. But not just one body. You count two, one curled beside the other, one larger, female, the pelvis unmistakable, the other male, judging by the narrow hips and collapsed ribcage. Their arms are touching, your breath catches. All the stories said she died alone, regal and resolute, a queen with an asp against her breast and no witnesses. But here lies something different, something more human. A woman who did not want to be alone in death, a man who followed her into it. You press your hand against the sealed doorway. Behind you, the cameras are already being set up. The press will want to know. The world will want a name. But down here it's quiet. The sand doesn't care for spectacle. The queen has waited long enough. You press your fingers to the marble, but it doesn't cool your skin. Alexandria is burning, not just outside the palace, but inside it, beneath your ribs, behind your eyes, in every whispered corner where the future used to live. The air tastes like copper and smoke. Far off you hear another crash, stone against stone, a statue toppling, the scream of a servant. Roman voices, too loud, too certain. They are not searching anymore, they are claiming. Your sandals leave no sound on the polished floor, but the silence itself feels like betrayal. Once these halls rang with your name, Cleopatra Thea Philopater. Now it's just echo, dust, and the ticking of your own breath. He's already gone, or so they say. They told you he died in your name, that he fell on his sword after hearing a lie, that you had done what you had not yet done, that he couldn't bear the world without you, not even 1 hour longer. But lies come easily now. They drip from mouths that once kissed your ring. The walls whisper things you can't unhear. You step into the antechamber, where the last embers flicker in their braziers. The torches have been snuffed. Your crown is gone. You wear only linen, soft and loose like burial cloth. The asp waits in the basket near your feet, coiled beside figs. They said it would be painless. They always say that. But it's not the snake that frightens you. It's the thought of being forgotten. You cross the chamber and sit beside the carved basin where perfume once glistened. Tonight it holds only water. You look into it, and the face you see is yours, and not yours. The lines are sharper, the mouth set harder. This is not the woman who seduced Rome. This is the woman Rome couldn't break, so it erased. And then you hear it, a footstep. Not Roman, not servant. You don't turn right away. You just close your eyes, because you know the rhythm of that step. You know who it is. He doesn't speak. He never does when it matters. He kneels beside you, and the linen of your gown brushes his arm. His hand finds yours. You both know what comes next. The stories won't remember this. They'll say you died alone, that you closed your eyes, pressed the snake to your skin, and vanished into myth. But that's not how it happened. You leaned your head against his shoulder. You breathed together, once, twice, 3 times. And then, only then did you choose your end. Together. His name has been lost, his story erased before it ever touched parchment. But his bones lie next to Cleopatra's, not crumpled in chains like a prisoner, not sprawled in violence like a Roman casualty. No, he is curled, carefully, deliberately, like someone who made a choice, and that choice was her. You wonder who he was. Not Mark Antony. His death was too public, too performative. The Romans made sure of that, and the timing never matched. He died days before her. Alone, by his own sword, they say. But this man died with her. He wasn't a soldier. His bones lacked the breaks, the scars of battle. Nor was he a labourer. His hands were too narrow, his teeth too clean. He lived in the palace, that much is clear. Someone close, trusted, allowed near the queen in her final breath. A priest, a scholar, a lover, or something stranger. A shadow the historians never noticed because he didn't fit the story they wanted to tell. You picture it. The torches extinguished in the hallway. Cleopatra seated upright, regal even in ruin. Poison in one hand, silence in the other, and beside her, someone who refused to leave. The Roman scribe said she feared being paraded through the streets of Rome, that she'd rather die than be dragged in chains behind Augustus. But what if it wasn't just pride? What if it was love? And what kind of man chooses death not for honour, not for glory, but for the simple, devastating truth that he couldn't imagine breathing in a world where she no longer did? The tomb bears no name, but there is something etched faintly into the limestone, almost invisible. 2 snakes, intertwined, not imperial, not Roman, Egyptian, a symbol of eternity. This was not the burial of a queen and her servant. This was a union, sealed in silence, buried in defiance. History was rewritten by the victors. The Romans gave her death a dramatic flourish, making her myth manageable. But they left out the man, not by accident, by design. Because if Cleopatra did not die alone, then her death was not a tragedy. It was rebellion. 2 bodies, 1 secret. No empire can erase that. Rome was never afraid of swords. It was afraid of stories. So when Cleopatra died, the empire sharpened its pen. Not to record her, but to remake her. They couldn't let her be brilliant. They couldn't let her be brave. So they made her beautiful instead. A woman undone by her passions. A queen who seduced 2 great Roman generals and brought ruin to their noble minds. Not a strategist, not a scholar, a temptress, a danger. They needed her death to feel earned, so they made her sin too big to forgive. You turn the page in a Roman scroll, Plutarch, Dio, Suetonius, and you watch it happen. 1,000 subtle edits, her intelligence minimized, her alliances reduced to affairs, her victories treated like flukes, her defeats like inevitability. The snake becomes a symbol of female vanity, her suicide an act of romantic melodrama. They never say she chose death because she saw what came next, a parade through Rome, a chain around her neck, a future where Egypt's crown would be dangled like a trophy behind Augustus. They didn't want the people to admire her. They wanted them to forget. Because a woman who defied Rome could not be remembered as wise, or powerful, or political. She had to be punished, she had to be shamed, and most of all, she had to be alone. The idea that someone died beside her, that she wasn't a defeated queen but a woman in control of her ending, that would rot the foundations of every empire built on fear. So they erased him. The man in the tomb. They erased the priests who stayed loyal, the guards who helped her, the women who may have sat at her feet as she chose her poison. They turned her story into a warning, not a memory, but stone remembers what ink tried to bury. And beneath the sands of Egypt, the myth begins to crack. Not because the truth is louder, but because it waited longer. The seal on the chamber wasn't Roman. It was older, Egyptian, etched in fading ink and crumbling wax, pressed with a symbol scholars argued over for decades. A twin serpent, coiled not in battle, but in embrace. No imperial crest, no Latin name, just the mark of something sacred. When the archaeologists cracked the seal, the air that escaped smelled of dust and flowers, dried lotus, faded resin, the kind buried with royalty, and something else, copper, the scent of what had once been blood. Inside, the walls were painted not with triumphant gods or scenes of conquest, but with two figures kneeling beside each other, a woman in royal white, a man robed like a priest. Their hands were nearly touching. You kneel with your flashlight now, heart hammering as you brush away centuries of sand from a carved alabaster urn. A name, faint but there, Cleopatra Thea Philopator, lover of her people, mother of a nation, last pharaoh of Egypt. But there's a second urn, smaller, simpler, and beside it a token buried beneath the rubble, a priest's amulet, cracked in half, no inscription, no legend carved in gold, just the silence of a forgotten witness. You remember the stories, how she was found with two maids. That's what the Romans said. Maids, servants, disposable. But this was no servant. His bones were placed carefully, not tossed. His fingers curled toward hers, as if even in death they were meant to remain side by side. This was someone who mattered, someone who chose to die with her, or someone chosen by her, and suddenly the legend changes shape again. Not a queen who ended her life in despair, but a queen who orchestrated her final act like a rite, with dignity, loyalty, and witnesses who believed enough to join her in death. You run your hand along the painted figures one more time. The colours fade under your touch, but the meaning stays sharp. This was not a tomb built to frighten, it was built to remember, a ritual, a seal of love, of power, of defiance. The Romans thought they had buried a scandal, but they may have buried a covenant. The skull had a fracture, just above the temple, clean, deliberate, almost ceremonial. Not the damage of age or collapse, but of intent. And nearby, in the dust, a sliver of polished obsidian shaped like a blade. You hold it in your gloved fingers and wonder, who placed it here? The woman's pelvis showed signs of childbirth. The man's ribs had healed from a break that must have hurt for years. Their teeth were worn unevenly, evidence of different diets, different lives, but they were buried as one. The bones don't lie. They tell you things the scrolls refuse to record, that she was not alone, that someone shared her last breath, that this was no suicide of a broken queen, but a ritual carefully prepared, fiercely defended, meant to stay hidden until the world was ready to see. One hand was still adorned with a gold, thin wire around a brittle finger. The other hand, his, bore no ring but something stranger. Scratches. Tiny carvings in the bone, as if he'd worn something tight for a long time. A cuff? A vow? You don't know yet. The DNA results will take weeks. But your gut already tells you what the science might confirm. They weren't just buried together. They chose it. It shifts the entire myth. Cleopatra didn't die in shame. She orchestrated her own ending. She staged a death the empire couldn't control. And she didn't do it alone. The sand had kept this secret for over 2,000 years. The marble tomb was cold, sealed, and perfect. But these bones, they still burned with memory, not with glory, not with defeat, but with intent. You look around the chamber again. The paintings, the scent of lotus faded to powder. The broken seal no longer guards the silence. And then your eye catches it, scratched into the stone, behind where the urns rested. A symbol, 3 words, in demotic script. Sloppy, rushed, almost hidden. We were not conquered. That's not a myth. That's not a romantic legend. That's defiance. A final message from the queen who outwitted an empire and vanished before they could own her. She didn't disappear. She waited. And now, after all these years, she's speaking again. They told us Cleopatra was a temptress, that she won with perfume and poison, that she seduced 2 great Roman generals and lost herself in luxury, that she died with a snake at her breast, naked, weeping and defeated. But that version wasn't written by Egypt. It was penned by her enemies, and we believed them. The marble statues in Rome carved her lips too full, her breasts too round. The plays made her voice sultry, her words soft. Shakespeare gave her daggers and silk. Hollywood gave her eyeliner. But none of them gave her silence, because the truth was quieter and more dangerous. Cleopatra wasn't a fantasy. She was a ruler, fluent in 9 languages, trained in law, astronomy, and military command. She stabilized an economy in freefall. She held a crumbling kingdom together with intellect, not kisses, and she was hated for it. Rome feared her because they couldn't own her. They called her a witch because her ships were faster. They mocked her bloodline because it wasn't theirs, and after her death they rewrote her story until the woman disappeared, and only the myth remained. The tomb you just opened doesn't confirm their tale, it fractures it. There is no evidence of the asp, no trace of venom, no collapsed body draped in gold. Instead, there are 2 figures, posed with care, entombed with messages meant for no one but the gods. Their positioning speaks not of chaos, but of choice. She wasn't taken, she left. That's what the myth never wanted you to know. That a woman could choose her end before her enemies did. That she could love without weakness. That she could rule without apology. You sit in the dust of her bones and feel the weight of how much was buried. Not just her body, but her dignity. They hid her brilliance behind scandal, her strategy behind seduction, her mind was behind mascara. But now, her silence is louder than their stories, and the myth that once blinded us, it's cracking. Right here, in your hands, you stand in the tomb long after the others leave. The lamps are dim now, the dust has settled. The air holds the weight of something older than memory. Before you, 2 skeletons lie side by side, one slender, the other broader. The grave goods whisper of royalty, lapis rings, shattered amulets, fragments of papyrus sealed in clay. But it's the arrangement that speaks the loudest. Their hands were touching. No royal burial would allow such intimacy, unless the queen herself had commanded it. You brush away the last of the sand and stare into a face no artist ever truly captured. The cheekbones are worn down, the teeth cracked, but something remains, a defiance. Even in death she does not bow. This was not a woman erased. This was a woman who planned how she would be remembered. They said she vanished after the fall of Alexandria. They said the Romans destroyed every statue, every inscription, every trace of her reign. But here she is, beneath centuries of denial, undiminished, and beside her lies someone who chose to stay, a servant, a sister, a lover. History doesn't tell you, it never did. But the body speaks. They weren't left here by accident. Someone defied an empire to bury them this way. And now, centuries later, it's not the conquerors who are remembered. It's her, not the generals who burned her city, not the emperor who paraded her children through Rome, but the woman who refused to vanish, Cleopatra. Not the myth, not the seductress, not the villainess conjured by foreign pens, the strategist, the scholar, the survivor, the queen who knew that history belongs to those who write it, and so she made her tomb her final script. You rise, bones stiff, fingertips trembling. The excavation is far from over, but one thing is clear. She buried more than her body that night. She buried the lie, and what remains is not dust, not legend, but truth. Still here, still watching, still waiting to be heard.